thing we have to fear is
in war.
fear itself.
There is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics, Wall Builders Live. You can find out more at our website, wallbuilderslive.com, and also at wallbuilders.com. I'm Rick Green. I've got one of those stories today that's just going to get under your skin. I hope it's going to make your blood boil the same way that it does mine. You've heard us, David and I have had the folks dealing with, Matt Staver dealing with the case in Massachusetts with little Justina, the gal that literally kidnapped by the state over supposed differences in medical opinions. We've had other cases from around the country, had Mike Ferris on talking about the parentalrights.org and the need to get legislation passed in every state to protect parental rights and prevent this kind of abuse from the state. I'm embarrassed to say that it's happening in my own state here in Texas. And I remember back in my days as a legislator fighting hard to try to reform CPS, Child Protective Services, and prevent the state from being able to step into a family that they just simply disagreed with, things like homeschooling or immunizations or some of these things that are parental decisions, not state decisions. And unfortunately, it has been an incredibly difficult battle to get those things in the right perspective. We haven't been able to get a good parental rights .org type piece of legislation passed in Texas, and we need to get that done. Anyway, there is a case happening right now in Texas that reminds me of the case out of Massachusetts. It's even worse from the standpoint of its 7 children that have been taken from a home. They have gone for months, the parents, without even being able to see the children. It's a horrific situation, and we want to bring awareness to it so that you can help this family and so that you, again, realize the need to take action in your home state to prevent this from happening. When I come back from the break, our guest today is going to be Tim Lambert. He's with the Texas Homeschool Coalition. He fights these battles all the time, and he's on the ground in this particular situation with the Tutt family here in Texas. Stay with us right here on Wall Builders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Our founding fathers, despite their common love for America, did not always agree with each other in politics. Such was the case between John and Samuel Adams. John was the leader of the Federalist Party, and Samuel was the leader of the Anti-Federalist Party. Consequently, political disagreements were not unusual between these two. On October the 4th, 1790, Sam wrote John and told him, "Let ministers and philosophers, statesmen and patriots unite their endeavors to renovate the age by educating their little boys and girls and leading them in the study and practice of the exalted virtues of the Christian system." 2 weeks later, John wrote back and told Samuel that on this issue they both agreed. While these two prominent founding fathers disagreed on much, they both agreed on the importance of educating the next generation in the principles of Christianity.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact Wall Builders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. Thanks for staying with us here on Wall Builders Live. Our guest today, my good friend from the Texas Homeschool Coalition, Tim Lambert. Thanks for coming on, sir.
Rick, glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for what you do for families all across Texas, defending parental rights and stepping in sometimes where families have no hope, they have no help, they just kind of throw up their hands and feel like the system is running them over. Many times you've been able to help families in the state of Texas, and right now there's a family that needs help. You're already involved. We want to get some other folks to help them as well. Tell us what is going on with this case with the Tutt family.
Rick, when I first heard about this case, I was reminded of that statement that we sometimes facetiously use, that no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
And this is a family that is a really godly family. They love the Lord and they love kids. They have a ministry to folks that are kind of down and out, folks with that are homeless or on drugs and that sort of thing. And as a result of that, they have adopted several children out of those kinds of backgrounds. And so they've had a long relationship with CPS. They've been a foster family in the past. They've quit doing that for obvious reasons, having troubles with CPS. But recently, in September of last year, they were working with a nonprofit group called Safe Families in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, helping these children in these kinds of situations. And they had a sibling group of 5 kids that they were keeping temporarily in addition to their own 7. And CPS also had placed an infant with them. And one of these sibling group, a younger child in that group, was autistic, wandered off. One of the Tut's kids went with him trying to get him back and was not successful, so he stayed with him. And Dad went out to look for him, and before he could find him, the police picked him up and brought him home and called CPS. CPS initial caseworker came by a couple of weeks later, and all the temporary kids at that time were gone. Initially, she said it didn't look like a problem. 30 days later, she came back and told Mom that she wanted her and her husband to do some parenting classes. They also wanted a psychological evaluation for both these parents. And Mom and Dad had already done a number of parenting classes.
Yeah, I was about to say, for them to have done all the fostering and everything that they've been doing, they've already been through the system and all their checks.
Exactly. So they said, here's their certificates of all these classes we've done this year, and by the way, here's an affidavit from my doctor saying that I'm physically and mentally fit to care for children. Will this be sufficient for your needs? And the caseworker said, well, let me check with my supervisor. If not, I'll get back with you. She never heard from him again. 30 days later, the caseworker goes to a judge in an ex parte hearing, which means the family is not notified of this hearing. They're not represented. And the caseworker asked the judge for an order to force the parents to get a psychological evaluation. And Rick, in an amazing course of events, the judge declines that request and instead issues an order to remove the children. And we believe the caseworker, in fact, the day the kids were taken, the caseworker told Mom and her adult daughter, who is married and has her own children, that she knew they didn't have cause to remove the kids, but she had to give the judge something or she would be mad at her.
And just to clarify, Tim, this is not, a lot of times people say, oh, well, this is some family out in the woods. They've never taken their kids to the doctor. They've never shown up in public. And they have these crazy scenarios that they've imagined that homeschooling is and all these other things. This is nothing like that. This family has been in the system. They've been dealing with the state and CPS and all these. The state knows who this family is. They know they've done a great job with these very difficult situations. So this is not like all of a sudden this judge decides, oh, well, we don't know anything about these folks. We're going to go take their kids. There's some vendetta here. It doesn't make sense.
Well, Rick, as a result of this case, I have amended what I recommend families to do to deal with CPS. And my point is I don't care if you're a foster care family, if you've adopted kids, if you work with CPS on a regular basis. I recommend that you record every conversation that you have with them, because what happens, Rick, if it becomes in the best interest of that caseworker or somebody in the agency to throw that family under the bus, they will do so.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm almost sure that's what happened in this situation. So the bottom line is they took the children from the family, 7 children. 4 of these kids were adopted. 2 were in the process of being adopted. And 1 was a biological child of the parents. And so on the December hearing, the family law attorneys called it a 14-day hearing where the state has to justify the taking of the children. Rick, this was a 12-hour hearing, and they hammered this family for their faith, their Christian faith. They hammered them for working with this nonprofit association that was not, quote-unquote, certified by the state of Texas, and they went after them for homeschooling their kids. The guardian ad litem appointed by the court made some false accusations against the family about homeschooling, trying to tell the court that the TEA had authority over homeschooling and these families were not using a certified curriculum, weren't reporting to the state. And the bottom line is the judge ruled that the children would stay in CPS's custody. So they...
I'm sorry. I have to even backing up to when the judge initially said to take the kids, because I think people sometimes don't realize how easy it is for your children to be taken away based on some trumped up charge, or in this case, a CPS worker just covering their own record and not wanting to look bad for whatever reason. They don't realize how easy it is for the system to yank your kids, and even in that case, a 14-day hearing. I mean, people need to realize my kids, I know, when they were younger, would have been traumatized had they been taken out of our home, and it took me 14 days to even get a hearing to try to get them back. People need to realize how easy the state can do this. We've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Tim Lambert, our guest here on Wall Builders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. As Christians become more active in politics, they must remember to elevate principles above party loyalty. Perhaps the best illustration of this comes from the life of Founding Father Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence who served in the presidential administrations of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, each of whom was from a different political party. When Benjamin Rush was asked of his personal party affiliation, he responded, "I've been alternately called an aristocrat and a Democrat. I am neither. I am a Christocrat. I believe all power will fail of producing order and happiness in the hands of man. He alone who created and redeemed man is qualified to govern him." Like Benjamin Rush, we too must remain Christocrats regardless of our personal party affiliation.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact Wall Builders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on Wall Builders Live. Tim Lambert is our guest today. We're talking about a parental rights case out of Texas, a family where 7 children taken from the home for no cause. And as I was saying before we went to the break, Tim, this is something people may not realize. I think most people don't realize how easy it is for the state to step in and take your kids. They think this only happens whenever there's severe abuse and strong evidence of abuse. That's not true. Unfortunately, we've empowered these states to step in and take kids just when there's a disagreement with some social worker or a guardian ad litem over little things, such as homeschooling or whatever it might be. And we've got to bring awareness to the fact that it is way too easy for these judges to take the kids away from their parent. And as I mentioned earlier, it creates, it would traumatize my kids if this happened.
Well, that's exactly right, Rick, and these kids have been traumatized, and it gets even worse. Now, so the attorney, the judge they were in front of at that time was an associate judge, which means she was not elected. She was appointed by other judges. So the attorney representing the family asked for a de novo hearing. So in other words, we want another hearing going in front of an elected judge. And in January the 7th, that hearing was an 8-hour hearing. And again, the judge said in that case that she was only going to hear justification for removal of the children. It devolved into the same kind of situation. Ultimately, that judge said that the taking of these children were not justified. So she ruled that the family could have four of their kids back, who she said you can't homeschool these kids. And the 2 that were in the process of adoption we're going to keep in foster care, and the 1 child from a previous marriage I'm going to place back with the ex-husband. Now, this is, as we speak, this is the middle of April, and Mom has not seen her biological child that was placed with the ex-husband since the taking of those children in November.
Oh, wow.
The 2 of the children that they have adopted are black children. They have a sibling which is in foster care, and that because that child was in the process of adoption. This week, the Mrs. Tutt and Mr. Tutt got to see that child in foster care for the first time.
6 months. 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, so they put him in public school. The guardian ad litem actually said to these parents, she visited their home along with the family's attorney, and she said to them, I don't have a problem with the home. I don't have any safety concerns. I don't have any problem with you as parents, but I will not agree to ask the judge to return your children unless you agree never to homeschool.
Wow.
And she argued that these children were 2 years behind. And in that in the January hearing, the judge said, if your kids were in public school and were 2 years behind, you would be banging on their door. Well, we're here banging on your door. Now, the problem that we have with that, Rick, was, first of all, this guardian ad litem, I'm not sure what kind of assessment she did.
Yeah.
But when you have kids, as you just mentioned, who are in a traumatized situation, they're not going to get good scores. And you add to that several of these children have come from horrific backgrounds. If these kids were in CPS's custody and CPS were in court, they would argue that these kids come from difficult backgrounds and they're doing very well academically compared to where they've come from.
Yeah, yeah. Which makes sense. I mean, if the roles were reversed, in fact, if we were to go take a survey of how the kids are doing that are in CPS care, there is no question we could make the same argument they're making. These kids are 2 years behind. We need to take them away. Well, maybe we need to take them away from CPS, get them in more homes like the Touch. So, and she obviously doesn't even understand homeschooling based on what was being argued in court with regard to what's required under Texas law. So how can she even make a decent assessment of how this is supposed to work?
Well, we don't believe her assessment was accurate, and frankly, Rick, when I got involved in this case was at the end of the year. They'd already had the December hearing, and I wrote a letter to the guardian ad litem outlining for her the legal status of homeschooling in Texas, and pointed out to her that the educational status of a child does not meet the statutory guidelines for abuse or neglect. And the guardian ad litem wasn't very happy about that. But she was essentially arguing that this family should not have these children back because they were behind academically.
It makes you wonder, what does she want? You know, what do they think is a better alternative? Like you said at the beginning of the program, no good deed goes unpunished. I mean, here's a family that has sacrificed of their time, their money, their life to take in these kids that were not even their biological kids. They're doing what we ask families to do in terms of adoption and taking in the orphan and that sort of thing. And they've done apparently a darn good job at it. And where would she prefer that these kids go? It just doesn't make any sense to me. One more quick break. We'll be right back. Tim Lambert's with us here on Wallbuilders Live.
Hey guys, this is Tim Barton with Wallbuilders, and I know you hear my dad and Rick talk a lot about our founding fathers, about the original intent of our nation, the constitutional heritage that we have, and really we've seen how far we've slipped away from that. And I know a lot of us, as we hear my dad and Rick talk, think, I wish there was a place that I could go and I could see these documents, and I could read and learn about the founding fathers firsthand, see the things they did. And I want to give you some websites today that can help you accomplish that very thing. If you get online, you can go to places like Library of Congress, and you can look under their Century of Lawmaking or historical documents. You can go to the Avalon Project, to the Founders Constitution, to Google Books, or even the Internet Archives, or you can just go to Wallbuilders' website. We have a section for our library, and under that section we have different subgroups for historical documents, historical writings, even a place where you can get helpful links to find out more information about other websites where you can do research for yourself and find the truth for yourself. Friends, this is a time that we need to know who we are and where we came from. Wallbuilders.com is a great place to go.
Let the torch of freedom
We're back on Wallbuilders Live, back with Tim Lambert, talking about this case out of Texas where these kids have been taken from their parents. And Tim, I was saying before the break, I mean, what do these folks want? I mean, what does the social worker or the guardian ad litem want? Where would they rather these kids be?
Well, Rick, this woman is of the persuasion, this guardian ad litem I'm speaking of is of the persuasion that this family is not qualified to educate these children, and therefore they should be put in public school. Now, the interesting thing in that public school, they had a status hearing on March the 28th. Attorneys tell me a status hearing typically takes 20 minutes. This one was 2.5 hours, so there's a pattern here. The district attorney in that case subpoenaed all the public school teachers, and and they all testified that these kids were behind. Now, they also pointed out that one of those children had been in public school before and had learning disabilities, and Mrs. Tutt had requested that this new school do testing for this child, which they had failed to do to this point. One of those children was a child of both Mr. and Mrs. Tutt, and that child was behind as well. Last week, the school district filed truancy charges thwarting compulsory attendance charges against Mrs. Tutt for the youngest child that was in school because she wasn't attending. This child, Rick, has been adopted by the Tutts. She was a crack baby, so her mother was on alcohol and drugs. She has severe issues, and Mrs. Tutt went to the doctors and got an assessment done in the school district. In their own assessment, agreed that this child really shouldn't be in class more than 3 hours a week. So we hired another attorney to represent them in the thwarting compulsory attendance hearing that ultimately was dropped as a result of dismissing all these other absences. So you got a system here, and we understand through some feedback that some of these teachers are working with CPS and passing information on. So it's just a horrific situation. And the next hearing we have is April the 30th, next status hearing. In the meantime, Rick, we have been reporting on this based on this family's got, there have probably been a dozen friends of the family and neighbors who've been in both of these hearings and have reported to us. We had a press conference in Dallas in January to call attention to this situation, and all those friends were there. We actually requested a transcript of the January hearing and went to court a couple of weeks ago and argued that we are publishing information about this case, and from a First Amendment standpoint and a freedom of the press standpoint, we have just as much right as the New York Times to get this information so we can make sure we're sharing accurate data.
Yeah.
And the Tutts didn't have a problem with that. Of course, the district attorney in Dallas did have a problem with it. Interestingly, the judge ruled that we could have a transcript that had been redacted so that only the information about homeschooling and the parental rights of the parents involved in homeschooling was the only thing that was available to us. So, interestingly, we have also retained an attorney in Austin, a great family law attorney who is looking at filing a writ of mandamus in this case. She has requested a transcript as well as an attorney of record. Just heard today that the court reporter has refused to give the Austin attorney a transcript because she has not yet made an appearance in front of the court. So we'll be following up with that. So
it's stonewalling it
to us. Yep. It looks to us like they are dragging their feet. So in the meantime, what we're looking at doing is filing a writ of mandamus. We're also considering a 1983 civil action against the caseworker, and our goal is to not only help this family get their kids back and to be able to homeschool, but to hold people that are involved in this accountable as much as possible.
Tim, I can only imagine the turmoil for the family, the way this kind of thing just throws your whole world into upheaval, and financial difficulty just adds to that, attorney's fees, all these things. How can we help you guys continue to help them? How can we help the family? Is there a place folks can donate? I mean, we have listeners all over the country, so they may not live here in Texas, but just like with Justina in Massachusetts, people around the nation are concerned about parental rights right now. They don't want this to happen in their backyard and their community. They want to help those that are going through this. What can we do to help?
Well, Rick, first of all, we would ask people to pray for the Tutt family, and you're exactly right. I got an email from Christina a couple of weeks ago that she saw this other child that's still in foster care driving down the street. Just heart-wrenching. So pray for the family. Also pray for us as we work with different attorneys and try that we'd have wisdom to make right decisions. And then obviously we need financial support to pursue this. People can go to thsc.org, and they can make tax-deductible contributions to our Parental Rights Litigation Fund. And they can also sign up for our updates on this case there, and we post usually every week or every other week on the case just to give people updates on what's going on.
thsc.org. And folks, we're going to make it easy with a link at wallbuilderslive.com today for you to jump right over, make a contribution, find out about the case, get on the email list, and you can learn more. Tim, sometimes people are shocked to hear these stories, but this is not the only one. This unfortunately happens way too often in America today.
Well, that's exactly right, Rick, and that's why we appreciate friends like y'all who, we talk to people who say, this can't happen. Surely this can't happen in Texas or America. And you're exactly right. This is not uncommon. And our goal is to push back so that these judges and these attorneys and officials know that there's going to be a cost to be paid for violating a fit parent's rights.
Well, we appreciate what you're doing, Tim, and look forward to a positive update in a few weeks or months. I can only imagine 6 months without being able to see your child. It's unfathomable. I am embarrassed that it's happening in our home state. But if we don't step up, if people don't rally to something like this, it's just going to happen more often. They've got to rally behind this family. They've got to say to the state, not on our watch. And one of the best ways to do that is help you guys. You're on the ground right there in the battle, and we appreciate you stepping in. Thanks for taking time to let us know about it, and let's get you back when there's some more news to share.
Rick, I appreciate you, brother.
That's Tim Lambert, Texas Homeschool Coalition. Go to the website and check it out, thsc.org. Thanks for listening to Wall Builders Live.
Stand undivided.